Thank you for the introduction and the opportunity to talk today. I am glad to share with you Profusa's story. It was 8 years ago. I was sitting in this audience with zero funding, trying to figure out how to get a company funded and off the ground. And so after many years and much persistence, I'm glad to share what we have found to be most useful to build our company with a lot of support from non-dilutive funding, and that has now led to investor funding. What Profusa's mission is. First, I'm going to give you a few slides just so you understand what Profusa is, what is our background technology. Our mission as a company is to make the biochemistry going on inside of our body to make it accessible on the outside without having to take a blood sample. So what do you do when you want to know your glucose, your lactate, your ions, all the things that a doctor needs to make a diagnosis? They take blood or urine to understand the biochemistry going on inside your body. So our mission is to create long-term tissue integrating sensors that will go in the body, stay in the body, and continue to report out signals of metabolites, ions, various chemical markers. So that's the focus of the company. This is our first sensor that is on the market. There's actually 4 sensors in the little vial pictured here. They are hydrogels that are soft and flexible. That's our core IP. Our core innovation has been to create tissue integrating sensors that are injectable. We don't like to use the word implantable, but they go in the body, stay in the body. Because they are have very tissue-like properties, the body accepts them. And that was our early stage research was all about the material properties that would allow a sensor to go in the body and stay there and to continue to perform its function. I had a leg up on understanding this problem in the 1990s. I did my PhD in long-term implantable electrochemical sensors, and I knew that the industry, the academia was fraught with problems, hurdles that weren't being overcome. And it was only if we could solve the immune response would we be able to create a long-term implantable sensor. And it was through the approach of creating tissue-like sensors that we were able to do this. So we utilize fluorescent sensing chemistries that are integrated into the hydrogel, so there's no stiff electrodes, no stiff materials, very tissue-like properties of the sensor. And after a single hypodermic needle placement of the sensor, the data comes out non-invasively. After that initial injection, it becomes a non-invasive optical signal that is read outside the body. We pride ourselves in clinical data to really have robust, dependable, continuous data coming from the body, and we've hit a real milestone of 4-year longevity in humans. What is pictured on the left-hand side is an actual human forearm with one of our sensors placed in it. You would not see that little glow with your naked eye. Only with the right sort of light source and filters would you be able to capture that signal. So to achieve continuous monitoring, we have invested in wearable sensors. That's a whole nother technology development and a component of our innovation, is how do you get something that's wearable? And what's pictured here is just our first prototype. We really are looking towards electronic tech 2, very Band-Aid-like flexible electronics. There's a whole lot of innovation needed to really take it from this kind of, I'll say it, clunky, even though it's our own sensor, but it's a starting point to get very nice continuous data out of the body. Now, what's pictured on the bottom is our vision. We have the vision to build multi-analyte sensors. We've shown proof of concept, but we have started with we have to do oxygen first alone and glucose first alone and then put them together, or lactate first alone. So we have been spearheading single analyte sensing with laying the groundwork in pigs or in the lab for multiplexing. But the vision is to get to multiplex sensors. And in fact, DARPA has very much shared that vision, as well as NIH, and that is a source of funding for us. So that little reader that's placed on the skin over the injected sensor continues to read out data. So from the wearable patches, the data is sent through Bluetooth to a phone, to an app. So we're developing apps now. It goes to the cloud. From the cloud, now here's a whole new growth area where we're really growing and learning and collaborating as a company. Once all of this data is streaming to the cloud, what do we do with it? We need good data analytics to figure out how to process all these streams of data that have never even been available before. So data analytics is another huge innovation area for us. And ultimately, we have to drive to decision making. What disease states are we applying these to, or what health conditions are we applying these to, and how do we make a decision based on all these data that will change somebody's health outcome, change a physician's therapeutic regime, change a patient's activity level. So that whole continuum, you could see the very much a multidisciplinary initiative here, starting from the materials and the immune response, getting the sensor to survive in the body, developing patches, going all the way through to data and analytics and decision-making support. I want to share with you just a few little snippets of the kind of data we get out, and this is my favorite slide of all time because it was our first and totally unexpected with a healthy volunteer. Just shows an example of exercise physiology of us tracking oxygen level. And you can see with kind of reverse push-ups and kickbacks with weight, you see a person's oxygen being depleted as the muscles use it, and then recovering as the person rests, and then depleted and recovering. And so we've done tons more with this, but that's just a first little snippet of like, yeah, our sensors are working in the body. And there's I'll just share with you quickly some other examples. Our first focus area in the company to try to make revenues is to become experts in critical limb ischemia. Right? We have this widespread platform technology of sensing. What do we apply it to make money? Critical limb ischemia, and that's been important for us as a company to figure out what we're going to focus on and why. Is it tissue flaps? Is it exercise physiology? Is it diabetes for glucose? Is it and why? It's important for us to choose that because that helped us guide our grant strategy, because there's a whole lot of SBIR funds that have gone into our critical limb ischemia, peripheral artery disease initiatives. So that's our first clinical application. We have published articles in that. We're in Europe in multi-site trials and in the market for applying our sensor. It has a general indication for oxygen monitoring, but we look to how it can help guide therapeutic decision-making on whether a chronically ulcerated foot is healing or not healing. And if it's if the foot is not getting oxygen, this is an oxygen sensor, if it's not getting oxygen, it's not going to heal. So we better change therapy, change exercise, change something to get oxygen to the foot. So just briefly, a couple other applications, and this is in the kind of research stage of flaps and reconstructive wound healing. The gut microbiome is a very advanced research initiative. Stroke and TBI from the brain for research, not for human at the moment, but for brain research in animals. Hypoxia, well, in pigs, but now moving to soldiers with partnerships with Air Force and other military initiatives. Cancer. So it just gives you an idea of like the broad space that we're trying to juggle as a company. How do we prioritize these initiatives? But the opportunities are there. In a snapshot, in one page, just to kind of like, who are we as Profusa? Our background, we incorporated in 2009 in Silicon Valley. We have multiple academic partners, and that also has been part of our success, is to make partnerships and collaborations with multiple academic partners. Our milestones, we were first funded by DARPA in 2011, and if it weren't for DARPA and NIH, we would not have gotten off the ground. We would not have existed. We started the company in 2008, brainstorming in 2009, officially incorporated. And after 86 VC pitches, I was like, I'm done. I cannot give another VC pitch. There was zero money flowing from venture capital at that time and at our stage and at our risk level. There was no appetite for a long-term injectable sensor. And so we turned to grants, and we started writing grants and writing more grants and trying to learn as much as we could. And if it weren't for DARPA picking us up and then NIH, I think we wouldn't have had the chance to really bring our idea to fruition. And once the grant money came, then investor money followed. Big landmark I spoke about, we have 4 years is and still going. The first sensor that was injected is still going after 4 years. So that really is a huge leap forward in long-term implantable chemical sensors. And what that same platform, hydrogel platform, we're functionalizing with glucose, lactate, and other functionalities. We have a CE mark. We're going through the FDA now. We have demonstrated multi-analyte sensors for a variety of things, and we've tested thousands of these sensors in animals, hundreds in humans, with no safety issues to date. Our funding has been DARPA and NIH grants. We're almost at $30 million now, and so that has been so formative in enabling us to really work through these groundbreaking technologies that VCs, often don't have the appetite and the long-term vision. They want a shorter-term return. But now we're investor-backed, and that has been a critical balance to have both investor money now at this juncture of our company, because we have some technologies now in the product stage, and we desperately need that investor money to help us push it into the market, help us with our IP, because grants don't pay for IP. That's an unallowable cost. To help us with developing the key thought leaders and the large-scale clinical trials that are needed to drive reimbursements. So the investor monies are critical, but because of the multidisciplinary and very, very early stage innovative technologies that we're bringing to bear, the non-dilutive funding from government sources has been incredibly valuable. We're very proud to tout that we were the first company ever to receive a Transformative Research Award, which is a kind of R01 grant that's given directly from the director's office of the NIH, and they're usually reserved for kind of like Bob Langer type innovative visionary academics. So that really was helpful to us early on in the company to receive that award that was attached with the R01 funding, which is a $4 million award. And the innovations that we spearhead are tissue integrating sensors, fluorescent or phosphorescent dye chemistry, skin optics. How do you get light to propagate through the skin and clearly read the signal and parse apart the errors? Wearable electronics, wearable devices, and digital health. We're located today in South San Francisco as our primary headquarters, but we do our preclinical work in Texas. And we got to Texas because of a collaboration, a grant funding, that we got grant money with Professor Mike McShane in Texas, and the cost of doing animal work was so much cheaper there. We started an incubator, and now we've grown to 8 people in Texas who both run advanced research laboratories and preclinical work. In addition to the Profusa sites, we have great collaborations, and this is our current list, but we've had several others through the course of the company, and these collaborations primarily grant funded to reach into novel technologies and innovations that we ourselves don't have the bandwidth to develop as a company. So that partnership, both with universities and at the bottom of the list is a DoD lab with Army Institute of Surgical Research, has been a very fruitful collaboration. And that leads me into, now I'm going to kind of shift gears and talk specifically about our grant strategy. What have we learned? What have we accomplished? What have we learned? I hope there's something that maybe you could take away from it. Let me just ask, who here is in the stage of seeking non-dilutive funding, actually writing grants? Who here has already received grants? So some have. Okay, good, just to get a sense of that. Well, let me just start with an overview. This is a graph of our non-dilutive funding from our inception. Actually, 2008 isn't on there. 2008 was a big zero, and we didn't actually incorporate until early 2009, but this is the growth trajectory, and I couldn't have imagined in 2009, 2010, sitting here with like multiple grants to juggle. It just seemed totally unreachable. We didn't know what we were doing, so to say. I just say that so that you know that it's possible to learn and get up to speed and figure out how to navigate what can be a very convoluted pathway through multiple government agencies to achieve funding. One of the things that, I guess the big so what is like, hey, we're almost up to $30 million right now, which has been huge. But the thing that comes clear in this grant is it hasn't been one big award or two or three big awards. It's been a lot of awards to manage, right? There's a lot of paperwork going back and forth. There's a lot of annual reports. There's a lot of monthly reporting for DOD. It used to be weekly reporting for one of our DOD projects. There's a lot that goes into this. And just in applying, we've had to put in at least 3 grants for every one that we actually get, all right? So there's a whole lot more work that has gone into just writing these proposals. It's not like we have some magic solution to just put it in a grant and get it. Although the more you do, the better you get, and enlisting the help of FreeMind, of people who are really experts in this, has been really helpful as well. And so FreeMinds, how have we engaged FreeMinds? As an early startup, we got our own feet on the ground. We didn't even know about FreeMinds initially. I kind of sort of heard about them and engaged, but we didn't have any money. We were bootstrapping. We did all of our own grants. And in these first couple years, we had a lot of failed grants. They went in, the first grant that we put in was like a $4 million grant, which is probably a little unreasonable for a little company and a PI who never had any experience, and we didn't get it. And we tried again, and we still didn't get it. But we made it our business to talk with the program manager, review every reviewer comment in excruciating detail, and try to learn from it and change our next submission. And that led us to eventually being able to be very successful. So it has been a very long-term building process for us. And in 2012, we actually got enough money around that we said, well, we've gotten some money, but we would like to do better, and are we doing the right strategy? So we actually hired FreeMinds to do a strategic assessment for us. And that was a short couple month, $4,000 studies, something like that. And what it did for us is it gave us the confidence that we ourselves, with all the work that we had put in, we were on the right track. We weren't like off in left field. We were actually having pretty good success rates. So it gave us the confidence to keep going on that. We still at that point didn't feel like we had enough money to part with to really hire FreeMinds on full time. And it wasn't until the later years that we said, okay, we really, just to keep our grant pipeline full and build on the success we have, we really need support. And so FreeMinds has been invaluable to us in the last several years to help us really achieve a rich, full grants program that has netted very meaningful returns for us, for our technical developments and company growth. So I think it's been maybe 3 years now that we've been, when we fully engaged FreeMind, we came with the goal of writing 1 grant per month. It's a lot. It is a lot. And FreeMinds could definitely keep up. We couldn't keep up. So I don't think we ever really achieved 1 grant a month, but that was our goal and what we tried for, because it is both quality and quantity. I mean, you have to play the grants game. You have to get grants out there. The reviews are, it's like people like you and me who sit on the review panels, and sometimes it's the luck of the draw of who reviews your grant. And so we really made it our business to make sure we put grants out there, and we could not have kept up that momentum and kept up with all the little ticky-tacky regulations and margins and all the little things that just weigh you down when you're trying to keep the big perspective of the technology. That's really what FreeMind has allowed us to do. I know they've helped other companies who were starting at ground zero. We actually had a starting point. We had investor money. We had grants. We had a starting point, but they really helped us to build that out to a full grants program that we continue with today. Now, how did this trajectory relate to investor funds? Because that's also been very important. It was only after that we got some sizable grants. We already had $750,000 from DARPA. By the time angels were like, yeah, we'll throw some money your way. And so, but it has been really a helpful synergistic relationship. And then, a couple years after that, an A round came. A couple years after that, a B round of investment came. And we're out right now, knock on wood, closing a C round shortly to really to grow our commercial efforts now. I want to go through some lessons learned. Take from it whatever you find useful, but I think the biggest driver of the success, assuming you have some starting point of like a technology and an idea which I'm assuming if you're here, you have a technology and innovation that is, interesting and meaningful, and so, assuming that is the case, then I think the biggest driver for success in the non-dilutive funding game is your persistence and your patience. It's not a quick thing, and I really appreciate Dr. Phillips' initiatives to try to make a quicker funding cycle. That's awesome, but it is not quick, so you shouldn't expect it to be quick. And if he can make it quick, awesome, go to him, but for every other agency, it is a long, slow slog. And those who can stick around and wait it out will be rewarded. At least that's what we have found. But if we would have walked away after a couple years, all that effort and initiative would have been lost. So I think patience and persistence has been the biggest factor that has been helpful for us. Learning from our mistakes. I don't have as much time to do this now, but we have some staff who does, and in the beginning, we really, every single reviewer comment, we made sure we went and met with the program managers, tried to get their insights, because sometimes there's things that are said in the room that don't get written down, but the scientific program manager, the scientific reviewer can sometimes fill in the gaps. And kind of help guide you. I mean, they want you to be successful, especially if they buy into your technology. So we had done several kind of like road shows to DC, and just in the effort of learning, saying, hey, we're learning, we're new at this, here's our technology, we think it's great, what do you think, where do you think we could go, what kind of conferences should we go to, what kind of doctors or physicians should we link up with? And so kind of learning. Also learning from misconceptions. By reading the reviewer comments very thoroughly, we learned that there are some misconceptions that we were not communicating clearly in our grant. That people were thinking like, oh, this device, they just assumed it would have to be biopsied out. And it doesn't. It's long-term, permanent, implantable. Like, it's made of materials that other devices are made that go in the body, stay in the body for a lifetime. So we had to clear up misconceptions that reviewers were making when they would read our grants. And now we don't make those mistakes anymore. Number 3, align yourself with those who will make you successful. Because we were just going it alone at first. That's not totally true. We did align with academics initially to help us get our proof of concept data, and that was really helpful, aligning ourselves with academic leaders. We ourselves had a publishing record, so that was helpful that I came out of this field and had some publishing, but we certainly aligned with professors or doctors who are thought leaders in the field, but other kind of experts who will make you successful, like FreeMinds. That's an important part of the journey. Number 4, tell a story. In writing a grant, I just learned through getting rejected and the ones that get accepted how nice of a story that we tell, so that somebody doesn't have to really understand the details of all the technology. I mean, they kind of want to, and you should be able to express it, but they gotta see an easy, spoon-fed story of how this fits in to make a big difference with a disease, a particular disease state. And then make your story marketable. I mean, this is, I feel a little seasoned saying this now, but it is not, as much as you want it to be about the technology and the medicine, medical care. What is the marketable story? Who's funding this, and how are they going to be able to hold you up and say, look at what I funded and look at how successful they are now? What do they need to say? And I think that's particularly important in military. You get champions who, they get their success because you're successful. They want you to be successful. So how do you help give them the data, the PowerPoint slides, whatever that they need to show that they've invested in companies that are making a difference in our healthcare? So actually physically, strategically thinking about how do you make yourself marketable, both to your program manager, but so that they can go to their boss and kind of show how you're making an impact in what their mission is, whatever that agency's mission is. Also, how do you make yourself marketable? A grant, even though maybe it doesn't specify it in the grant, when you read the instructions on writing a grant, the BAA or the RFA, it might not say anything like you have to have patents, or you have to have publications, or you have to have biocompatibility data, or it doesn't specify, but we've now learned after all the comments we get, if you've had a bunch of grants and you don't show off your patents or you don't show off your publications, you're not getting all the mileage that you could out of all of your successes. So we've learned how to kind of market those successes, that we have built a portfolio, we have a regulatory approval, we have, and we highlight those things to help the reviewers understand that, okay, we know what we're doing. And when we didn't have those things, we highlighted those things based on the pedigrees of the people involved in the grant. So when we were at our infancy, we didn't have, a successful track record, but each of us individually who came together as a team did have patents, have startup companies, have publications in the field, or whatever it is. So we learned how to put our best foot forward, so to say. Okay, going on, we have the top 10 list here. So number 6, build an internal grants management function. And that's not just grant writing. It has been important for us we have a person part-time on site now who, that's what she does. And sometimes it really goes to more full-time, and I do a lot as the PI too. But we've built that internal function, not just to write grants. That is important, but then you have to deliver. You have to account. That internal management function of who's making sure the government accounting is being done right, because you're going to get audited, and if you get audited and it's not favorable, you don't get the next grant. You got a big mess you got to clean up before you can get the next grant. So building that internal set of processes that accounts for where all that government money is going, making sure you're not spending on unallowable things. There's unallowable things like you can't spend on alcohol, you can't spend on patents, and we, as a company, of course, do spend on those things, but we pay for it with investor money, and we have an accounting system that allows us to demonstrate where the grant money is flowing and that it's tied to what we're supposed to be spending it on. And that's been very important. Number 7, be strategic about when and where you apply for grants, because you can just keep applying and applying and applying, but I think that's something that FreeMind also helps us with a lot of which grant and why, which agency and why, what do you have to do to be successful with a particular agency. So that I think that strategic component is important, so you don't just spin your wheels. And then I mentioned before, quality and quantity, at least with NIH. Don't just depend on one grant. That's what's made us most successful. Is the more you do, the better you get, and it is somewhat a numbers game. Number 9, balancing IP and publishing to build a successful pipeline. If you intend to really make it a long-term See, it's different companies need different things, depending on your kind of technology, but we knew we were going to need long-term money to make in vivo sensors successful. We knew it wasn't like a quick flip or a quick digital health play, and in that case, you might not need to think about it as a long-term pipeline. It might be great for you to get a single grant to really get you off the ground. So it all depends on what your company needs. But for us to build that long-term pipeline, we have to show that we've been successful with the initial monies, and we show that by showing our IP record, our publishing record, our productization, our commercialization record. So that's important. Number 10 is deliver, deliver, deliver. You said you took this money to do it. You said you were going to do it. Now do it, and make sure you show that you do what you say you're going to do, or you have a really good excuse why you didn't do it. I mean, grants are amazing because they actually are very flexible, but it's all how you manage that flexibility. Program managers, they give you that money, they really want you to be successful. So if you realize, it's a year later, things change, you now want to go in a little different direction, talk to your program manager, get their buy-in, and they almost always say yes to do it, because if they can see why you need to shift gears, then they'll get on board and let you spend that money in a way that you didn't even envision a year ago or 2 years ago or however long the pipeline was. So I think that's important to have those conversations. Let's see. I think this is my last slide. It's interesting as I look back and as I reflected to prepare for this talk, what has changed as we grow as a little startup from inception till now. Now we're 33 people in 2 different sites, and if you add consultants and professors and students and so on, we're probably 60, 70 people working on this initiative. So what's changed? When we started, we budgeted, in writing a grant, we budgeted small percent of many people because we needed an optical engineer, but we didn't have big budget, so we had to do 10% of an optical engineer and 10% of a data scientist and 10% of a preclinical person, and we just tried to scrape by, but then how do you hire people when you only have 10% of funding to hire them? So now, and we have more of a luxury now when you have some funding from investors and multiple grants, but now we try to budget 100% FTEs, if possible. It's not always possible. Doesn't always make sense, but we try to because we know, okay, we get that grant, we're hiring a person. And with our growth trajectory, we're not too worried about sustaining. We expect that to continue to grow. That's number 1. Number 2, we used to try for any grant. We're doing it. We're going to try. We'll give it the old college try. And now we really try to focus more strategically on where have we been successful, which agencies do we best align with. Number 3, we used our grants to get our scientific work done, and now we still use it to get scientific work done, but we also use those grants strategically. We use them in press releases when the time is right. We use them in fundraising. They form part of our due diligence because now we've had this whole body of very credible scientists reviewing our work and giving feedback. So we have made it available to our investors, the reviewer comments. So there's kind of that strategic use for the grant proposals that has been very helpful. Number 4, it was a balancing act between writing grants and investor pitches at the beginning. And then now it's more of a balancing act of writing grants, managing the grants, because we have them, now we have a lot, and it's a lot to juggle. So it is a balancing act, something we still work on perfecting, which we haven't yet. It's a real juggling, balancing act to write grants, manage grants, and what we're supposed to do as a little startup is build the commercial organization, which now as we grow is taking precedence. We got to build, we're supposed to make revenues. That's what our focus needs to be. So, and number 5, we hired outside consultants for accounting. That was invaluable. We didn't know what we were doing at the beginning, so we said, let's hire outside. I saw Jameson on here. We started with another consulting firm. It was a little helpful, but Jameson has, they know what they're doing with DOD and NIH, and that was really helpful. Really, really expensive for a little startup. It's not so bad as you grow a little bit, but that we hired that outside consulting. We still use outside consulting, but we have an internal function. We have internal accountants who really keep all the money accounted for and flowing. And with that, I just say thank you for your attention, and I will welcome any questions.
Can you comment how you laid out on your Series B pre-money compared to 30 million of non-dilutive?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know if I'm supposed to give like the actual numbers, but we did very well. Let's just say that it was considered, so to say. So we really are kind of more like a Series E now in terms of our raise and our valuation because of that grant money.
So the 30 million, as if it was a paying capital, and an up round going into your Series B.
Yeah, we've had up rounds, and I don't know if they looked at it dollar for dollar exactly in that way, but yes, it was definitely considered.
First of all, great talk.
Sure.
Share a little bit more about how you discovered grants you would apply for.
How we discovered the grants we would apply for? Yeah, I mean, Google is an amazing thing. Google and professors. So I came out of grad school out of an engineering PhD, and so, talking with my professors and NIH itself. I mean, they're actually really open and helpful. Program managers will talk to you. You just kind of get on the websites and find somebody to engage with you, and that just reaching out. It was much harder to navigate the DoD to start out. It was. Like, I didn't talk about that. For NIH, I think they make themselves very accessible. There's open conferences, and you can pretty much apply cold. You don't have to have a relationship. Our experience is with DoD is it's been really helpful to have a relationship, but how do you get a relationship when you don't have one? And so those early stages, we were going around like little puppy dogs trying to meet people who would like grab onto our story and help usher us through. We made a couple huge blunders. We applied for a BAA that nobody really kind of gave us the nudge or anything, but we had no idea what we were doing. We were like, what they asked for was to develop something that there was no way you could do it in like $4 to $6 million, and they didn't put any thresholds. They said, ask for whatever you need. So we asked for $26 million. And it was such a waste of time for us because we spent months and the company to pool all those subcontracts together, to pool it all together, and then it was like that. We only learned afterwards that they didn't even have that much money in the pot that they were trying to distribute. So getting wise on, when it's the right time for you to apply and that there's really somebody there and that you're applying for the right monetary amount. Because a lot of times grants will say, no cap, apply for what you need. And you think, oh my God, if I'm going to build a sensor that has to last 3 years in the body and sense proteins and RNA, I'm like, I don't even know if I can do it. But if I do it, I'm going to need, many multi-millions. And so, but anyway, I would just try to create as much as you can, form a relationship with DoD. That's been our approach.
First of all, great talk. Congratulations on all the relationships.
Thank you.
And so on. My question about that is, when you collaborate with academics, do you expect them to do the grant writing, or do you do the grant writing?
We would love it if they would do the grant writing, but it has never worked. Oh, sorry, repeat the question, because people in the back didn't hear it. The question is, when we work with academics, do we expect them to write the grant, or do we write the grant? And it has always, until last year, we have had one. But we've always taken the lead and done, I feel like, even sometimes more than our fair share of doing that. We definitely utilize them, get their input, but they march to a different drummer, a different timing. So we also, I would say that we do the heavy lifting there. And it's also true for getting letters of support. We'd love it if people will just write us a letter of support, but then you're like 2 days before the grant is due and nobody's gotten back to you, and you're like, how about this as a draft? Will you take a look at that as a starting point? And then all of a sudden you get your letters of support back. So, we do the heavy lifting. Yeah.